Hey everybody, welcome to this evening's webinar on Insider Tips for Crafting a Memorable Personal Statement, a webinar brought to you by Moon Prep and AUC and Ross Med. We are going to have a couple more minutes to get everybody logged in to tonight's webinar. So if you're hearing my voice, you are in the right spot, and I just wanted to tell you a couple of things to make this evening's webinar more meaningful for everybody here. So one is, you probably realize that your line is muted. So if you're trying to talk to us and you're wondering why we can't hear you, it's because we do keep those lines muted for background noise purposes. So what we would like you to do is, if you're hearing my voice or seeing my picture up on the screen, there's a question section, and depending on what type of device you're on, whether it's a cell phone or a computer, find that question section. Sometimes you have to unpin it from the bar. There's a little box with an arrow. You'll be able to unpin it from there and say hello to our group today. So just let us know where you're logging in from, maybe what year in school you are, just any general things that you want to say about yourself in that welcome box. Our team will be there to say hello to all of you as we get everybody set up. We will start the webinar just a minute or two after the hour to make sure that we can get everybody logged in and ready to go that is here for this evening's webinar. So again, if you're hearing my voice, seeing my picture, you're in the right spot. I see a lot of you have found your way to the question section already. That's fantastic, because we will use that question section throughout this evening's presentation to make sure that we get all of your questions answered about writing your memorable personal statement, or any questions that you have in general about the American University of the Caribbean School of Medicine or Ross University School of Medicine, of which this is a co-hosted webinar. So welcome. We'll give it another minute or so. I'll come back on and give the same instructions so that everybody who's logging in can hear appropriately, and we will make sure that everybody's ready for this afternoon's webinar. So welcome everybody. Say hello in the question section, and I'll be back on in just a second to give another set of ground rules before. All right, everybody, once again, I'll just go through our ground rules as we do have several folks logging in right now and getting logged in for the webinar. Just wanted to say hello and welcome to the Ross University School of Medicine and American University of the Caribbean co-hosted webinar with Moon Prep on insider tips for crafting a memorable personal statement. We know that you all will be very excited about the topic coming at you tonight, but before we get started on today's webinar, I just wanted to lay out some ground rules just to make sure that everybody knows how the webinar will flow. If you've just joined us and haven't heard my message already, do remember that as you come in to GoToWebinar that your line is muted. We do that just because we want to make sure that everybody clearly can hear our presenters speaking and talking about all of the wonderful things that they're going to bring this evening. So instead of speaking your questions to our group, we're going to ask that you use the questions section. And depending on what type of device you are logged into, whether it's mobile or a desktop, it can be in a different spot. But you'll see it's called questions. There's usually a little square around the outside. You can bring that question section out, and we would love for you to go ahead and say hello in that question section. Let us know where you're logging in from this afternoon or day, depending on where you are in the world. It seems like we've got a lot of students already have found their way to that question section. And again, it's great to see where you guys are logging in from Canada. I see some from Maryland, Colorado, more Canadians, lots of you out there. So it's great to see where all of you are logging in from. So please do, again, say hello to us in that question section. I will have one more call out for you before I introduce our presenters. We also have handouts. So part of tonight's webinars is that there's a handout section, either at the bottom of your screen if you're on mobile, or to the right if you are on the desktop version. And our presenters from Moon Prep will be referencing those handouts that are free for you to take as part of today's presentation, so that you can continue to learn from the content that you're going to hear this evening, and that you'll be able to take that and use that as you're crafting your own memorable personal statement for your application to med school. So without further ado, we're just a couple minutes after the hour. I'm going to go ahead and have our two presenters, Michaela and Lindsay, turn on their cameras, and I will do a quick little introduction for everybody that is here to have you guys learn a little bit about Lindsay and Michaela. So first and foremost, I will introduce Michaela. So Michaela, go ahead and give everybody a wave. She's a college counselor at Moon Prep, and her expertise is helping students craft noteworthy applications and to pursue impressive extracurricular activities to be able to catch the eye of top universities and competitive med programs. So she's a former admissions counselor, high recruiter from the University of Nebraska. She's got a heart for supporting students in their pursuit of their academic dreams. She's previously worked alongside the guidance of counselors for international baccalaureate high schools, developed college readiness curriculums for nonprofits, and has gained experience in college admissions with the University of Nebraska before bringing her expertise to Moon Prep. So Michaela will be leading us through some of this tonight. With her is Lindsay, and Lindsay, go ahead and give a wave to everybody. Again, Lindsay is a college counselor and tutor at Moon Prep. She helps students create memorable personal statements and applications that stand out from the masses. So she focuses on helping students apply to med school, BS and MD programs, and even physician assistant programs. So her strengths lie in helping students craft memorable personal statements, which is obviously the highlight of our webinar tonight. And she's a journalist by trade, which is pretty cool. So she's had her work appear in Forbes, Dwell, Trulia, Stack Street, and many other publications. So she's got over 8 years of experience as a writer and editor, including personal statements and essays. So you will be in really good shape listening to Michaela and Lindsay. So with that being said, I will go ahead and pass it over, ladies. You guys can take it away. And again, if you have questions as we go through, we will take questions at the very end. Please make sure that you do direct those questions to chat. So Lindsay and Michaela, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us this afternoon. It may seem hard to believe, but the perfect time to focus on crafting the perfect personal statement for medical school is actually right now, because those applications are opening up right around the corner. But first, before we get too far into the presentation, we wanted to introduce ourselves and tell you why you should listen to our advice, and tell you a little bit about our company before jumping into example essays and structuring ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Michaela. We'll introduce ourselves here in a second too, but first we'll tell you a little bit about who Moon Prep is. So Moon Prep is made up of a team of independent college counselors who work with students virtually, and we're guiding students through the entire college admissions process. Also high school, so we also accept high school students. And the counselors at Moon Prep serve as a guide and mentor to all of our students. We're just focused on helping build the strongest possible applicant profile for medical school, whether that's providing guidance on the type of involvement to pursue in college to stand out to medical schools, or helping craft or brainstorm the perfect personal statement, which is what today is all about. So essentially, we're working with students in a one-on-one capacity, not classes or anything like that, although we have those available too. So we don't follow a typical Monday through Friday 9 to 5 schedule. We're working nights, weekends, and various time zones, honestly, whenever it's convenient for you. So that means we're often proofreading essays on a Saturday night, or last night at 11 p.m., or even jumping on a Zoom call with you, at last minute notice, to answer a question that you ran into on an application that was unexpected. And that's just kind of where we step in, and we just help you out every step of the way, whatever you need. And our company is really unique, actually, because we accept a limited number of students for each counselor, so we can completely focus on our students' individual needs. And we have a focus on highly selective college admissions and direct medical programs, or those BSMD programs, and also medical school applicants. And our counselors also, we meet regularly to share advice over our students. So honestly, when you work with one of us, you're getting advice and you're working with all of us.
Yeah. And a little bit more about us. So we have been writing on Forbes for quite some time now. And so part of what we've been doing on Forbes is really trying to get the insider information from universities like, or medical schools really from like Ross or AUC, US-based schools as well, like ones in New York, both MD and DO, just to help us understand a little bit more about the process, understand what the schools are looking for in their students to help us guide students just like you throughout the college or the med school application process. And if you check out our YouTube page as well, and Michaela will be sending the links to both of these in the chat right now. You can check out our YouTube page. We have a ton of interviews with both med school students who've gotten into competitive specialties, with deans of admissions at medical schools. You know, a lot of these interviews are just designed to help you understand, you know, really what you're getting into throughout this process, what these admissions officers are looking for in their students, and more importantly, how coronavirus has affected the process. So a lot of our work has been, you know, in the past year or so, looking at these types of situations, just to make sure that you guys understand a little bit more about the process. Okay.
I'm still adding one quick thing to the chat. I'm so sorry, guys. I have a lot of all the different chat things all popped out, so I'm like moving things around my screen. So give me a moment.
I can introduce myself first if you'd like, while you readjust yourself, and we could go back. But anyway, so my name, I'm Lindsay, and I'm a counselor. Oh, you got it now. Okay, we'll go back to you.
Oh, sorry, everyone. The little button is so hard. The little part is so hard to find. Okay, so hi, everyone. My name is Michaela. And previously, before I came to MoonPrep, I worked as a staff writer for a national magazine. It's actually a company that owns like 5 or 6 magazines, so I wrote for all of them. And then I was also an admissions counselor for a Big Ten university. So I was a counselor right in that seat, reading hundreds of applications and essays. So I kind of have the unique perspective of having been the one reading the essays and applications on the other side of the screen. And now, ever since I came to work with MoonPrep, I also have an author page on niche.com and spend my time working as an independent counselor at MoonPrep, obviously, where I really try to specialize in helping students find notable activities on campus to help strengthen their applicant profile. And I also, you know, just personally love helping students find their perfect personal statement, because of course I like to write.
Perfect. And I also am a counselor at MoonPrep, and so I do have a lot of experience working with both, you know, DO and MD applicants, helping them throughout the whole entire process with every type of application platform too. And like Michaela, my favorite part really is, I think, the essay writing portion, which is why this webinar is so perfect for us, just because it's the time for students really to showcase their personality, to showcase who they are. And so we help them kind of showcase that and emerge ultimately, hopefully, as a stronger writer. And so, as I kind of already mentioned, I do a lot of the writing here at MoonPrep along with Michaela, and just trying to make sure that we can showcase your passion. So that's really, I think, my favorite part, is helping the students find their passion and then showcase it through their activities, through their essays, and then ultimately through the interview process as well. So let's get into it. So I did notice in the questions that we had some younger students as well. So this part will be, I think, especially useful for you, just to make sure that you're staying on track throughout the application process, because this definitely isn't just a couple months of work and then you're in med school. As I'm sure you've started to realize, it takes really years to get into medical school. And so if, you know, you are a little bit older, already going through this process, you know, you don't have to pay attention to year 1 and 2, but for our younger students, it is really important that you be spending the first 2 years of your undergraduate experience maintaining a high GPA, and not just a high regular GPA, but, you know, focusing on the science GPA as well. Starting to form strong relationships with medical focused mentors, because those will be useful for multiple reasons. Not only are they helping to, you to enhance your skills, to gain new knowledge, to get new experiences, but you will need letters of recommendation later on. And so it helps if you have someone who can speak to that relationship over a couple of years. And of course, it is important for you to start building your extracurricular resume. And if you're in your first 2 years, reaching out to the pre-health academic advisor to make sure you're staying on track, you're not missing any prereqs, and you are, on the right path to medicine. And so if a lot of our students are in third year, which is really when the work really begins, this is kind of where I'm assuming a lot of you guys are. So making sure that you're still meeting with your pre-health advisor to make sure you're still on track, as always. But now's kind of the time when you can start to really hone in on your medical school list, looking at specific admissions requirements for medical schools, what specialty their students tend to match with, and their teaching style, to make sure that not only are you a good fit for them, but they're a good fit for you. You want to start creating this list of medical schools you might want to attend, so then you can rank them in order of preference. You can start to just prepare that list as you're going along. And of course, many students take the MCAT either right before their third year or during their third year of school. I'm sure I don't have to tell a lot of you, but you'll likely have to study between 200 to 300 hours over the course of 3 to 4 months to get a competitive score on the MCAT. So if you haven't, get cracking on that. And also during the third year of undergraduate, like every single year, you need to be still working on your extracurriculars, seeking out opportunities. The pandemic is not an excuse to let your extracurriculars slide. There are tons of volunteer opportunities. Research can be done, virtually. There's still a lot of ways you can be a medical scribe virtually. One of the interviews, or actually quite a few of the interviews we did with admissions officers, were during the pandemic, and that's what they kind of mentioned, is that they're looking for students who are identifying a need in their community, even during the pandemic, and then trying to find a way to solve that problem, to fill that hole. So we want to make sure that our extracurriculars are not lacking during the pandemic. But that being said, we don't want our extracurriculars to consume all of our free time, just like we don't want our studies to consume all our free time, because we need to have a balance of both. GPA still needs to be high while you're taking the more advanced science courses and studying for the MCAT. And so a lot of you guys are probably in the spring of the third year of undergraduate, right before application season, because this is really when it starts to get a little hectic. If you haven't done so already and you're planning to apply to medical school this cycle, make sure to start to request letters of recommendation from the faculty members or physicians, whoever you forged a relationship over with the past couple of years. To do this, a little tip is just to write a bio about yourself, give them your resume. It will just kind of help with that process. And a lot of those major application platforms will open up in May, so you can start to be submitting your application, your transcripts, or I guess really at the end of the month. And so you want to make sure that you are ready to go once those application platforms open. So the goal, which is why you guys are here, is to start writing your personal statement, start listing out your extracurriculars, gather all your application materials, make sure you have your letters of recommendation ready to go, because the goal should be to apply as soon as possible. Okay, now to the good stuff.
And I just put in the chat as well, we have a couple articles about timelines for medical school as well as DO programs. So those 2 links are in the chat now if you want to copy them and open them or for after this to look through. So when students are, preparing to apply to medical school, you obviously need to prepare a personal statement, which you'll use to apply to the colleges on your list using the same essay. The essay will have 5,300 or 5,000 characters, depending on where you're applying. But in order to get into your dream school, you need to not only have great grades and solid test scores, but also have a strong personal statement that really allows the colleges to get to know who you are. The essay exists so that schools can complete a holistic review of your application, and it allows them to see kind of the whole picture of who you are. This essay is really your chance to, on your application, to show your personality beyond just your resume. It allows you to become a person off of the page. So this is not the time during the essay to restate your resume, or just, people kind of tend to use this as just, I'm just going to explain my resume in greater detail, and that's not the place to be doing that. And it's also not the place just to casually introduce yourself and talk about, your self-discovery process in middle school and things like that. This is the time to really stand out and let your words create a powerful message of your character that allows them to just to honestly get to know you. And the more they get to know you, the more they will want you. So if you allow the essay to kind of speak and show who you are as a person, you have a better chance at admission.
And this might seem really scary at first to kind of showcase who you are, to be personal, but it does take some work and some time. So that's why it is really important that you start this process now, so that you have the time to evolve your personal statement to really, as Michaela was kind of saying, dig deep and showcase who you are. A lot of students do not nail it on the first try. It sometimes takes a few efforts. And so that's why starting now, so that by the time the application's open, end of May, you'll be ready to apply, right away. So these are kind of some initial questions to consider for your personal statement. We're going to go into some more intense brainstorming questions later on. But coming up with this essay topic, like I said, is often not easy. But your grades, your extracurriculars, your MCAT score, it's only showing one small part of you. So this is whenever we really have to show a picture of you, even if it's just for a short time. So we want to think about how we can use those, 5,000 characters to showcase you. So these are some kind of initial questions to kind of get you to start thinking about, why have you selected the field of medicine? What motivates you to learn more about medicine? And most importantly, what do you want medical schools to know about you that hasn't been disclosed in other sections of the application? So like Michaela was saying, not just a repeat of your resume, it has to be going a little bit deeper.
Yeah, absolutely. So the biggest thing, when we're getting started with trying to brainstorm, how do we start? That's what the biggest question we get in Moon Prep from every student is, where in the world do I start to try to find this essay? So I always tell students to really really do a deep dive into their resume. Just completely spend time almost like journaling and just spending time looking at the items in your resume to have them not only fresh in your mind so that you have ways to tie into them when you start to write, but also there's often usually stories hidden within your resume. For instance, I just had a student who published an ebook, and he published an ebook that was basically experiments to do at home for students on the autism scale. So they're like DIY home experiments. Now he has a website where he actually teaches classes virtually, but when he was looking at his personal statement, he wanted to write about the fact that about this book and the process of publishing this book. But the reason behind him publishing the book is the fact that his classes, kind of overfilled. He was so busy, and he wanted to give students resources to do outside of the classes that honestly his business and his classes were doing so well. And he wanted to talk about his original passion for helping students on the autism scale and where that passion began and then where it led him. So for him, looking at his resume and looking at the fact that he had just published this book recently, that triggered for him oh, this is what I want to talk about, is the reasons behind why I did this item on my resume. So spend time in your resume and look at the reasons behind each thing that you pursued. And there's likely to be, a hidden story in there somewhere for the reasons for why you pursued different things, or really what you learned and how it could be applied to your life, even in unexpected ways. So spend time in your resume and really kind of see if there's something hidden in there. One last little thing, I have an example too. I had a student a couple of years ago who read a sample essay that was written in a way that described life as a math problem. And it was like this plus this equals this, but if you add this, you get a completely new equation. And so he wrote about his essay that was like, I've taken that into my own life practices, knowing that if I add one element, it could change my perspective completely. So he took that concept, really liked that, and wanted to put like that kind of like sparked his own idea basically. And so he wrote about how he loved baking, but since he was pre-med, he reimagined the elements of baking a cupcake from scratch into a scientific example, talking about how the ingredients reacted together in the oven and how he experimented with unique flavors to create a brand new product. So that is obviously a really great idea, but it sparked from something that he read somewhere else. So write down all the things that you see in play going on in your resume and see if there's different things behind it that you could bring in and talk about in an essay.
There it goes. Okay.
So as far as, kind of a process for like where to get started, because again, everybody asks that. My first suggestion, and again, this is just my process, so everybody is different, but if you're really struggling with where to get started, this is a good place to start. The first thing to do is to read over brainstorming questions, which we'll have a couple as an example, but you can look at lists of them online. We're not reinventing the wheel here. There's brainstorming lists everywhere. So look over all of those questions and answer them on a separate page. So just kind of almost like journal on a page and answer different brainstorming questions so that you kind of explored the items not only on your resume, because you spent time on your resume too, but you've also like familiarized yourself with the content usually found in personal statements. Since they're personal statement brainstorming questions, it's going to be similar to what people have written about. So then you're familiar with kind of answering and talking about the concepts that are normally found in personal statements. Then your next step is to seek out a bunch of sample essays, as many as you can find. I actually randomly run across a lot on Reddit. People really are like proud of their essays and they'll just post them on Reddit. So that's an interesting place to find a bunch of them. And just seek out a bunch of sample essays to get a feel for how like the format and the effective tools that you really are drawn to, and kind of write them down, kind of start a little collage for yourself of things that you find effective and that you might want to incorporate. And honestly, this almost always happens is you'll read an essay from someone else and it'll spark a completely different idea. Like it's not like you want to do the same thing, but just reading something about, oh, someone climbed a mountain, and it'll just like make you think of something completely different. Like, oh, metaphorically, I climbed a different mountain, but it was like more of an emotional journey. And then like you'll have your idea just from reading a bunch of sample essays. It really will help like spark a big idea for you, especially if it connects with one of the moments in your life that left a significant impact. So I recommend creating a separate document of every element, even like sentences that you really thought were incredible, starting like opening lines, ending lines, or really kind of those pivotal moments in essay. Or even a formula that you really thought was like, I could absolutely kind of recreate the formula I saw in play in that sample essay. Just write down everything that you thought was a really good idea. And then think of ways that you can try to recreate that formula or those elements in your own life and with your own personal experiences. Then lastly, create an extended outline with full sentences or paragraphs of what you want to say and where, so that you have a great structure to start with before you actually start crafting your sentences. If you get introspective and deep and really just drawn out and thorough with your extended outline, it helps you create the essays so much, rather than just saying like, talk about your dog here, now talk about dad's background here. If you're putting full sentences or even paragraphs of like, talk about why dad came over here from a different country and why I want to go back and explore that country on my own to get a different sense of home, like to have that in your outline instead of just talk about dad. It really helps you get even deeper and more introspective in your actual sentences. So I would just say, as an example, the last extended outline that I worked with a student on to like get it to the full extended outline until it was a full extended outline completed. It was 350 words on the Common App personal statement, which has a maximum of 650 words. So literally it was half of it. So that's how extended an outline should be if it's really thorough and like well done.
Perfect. So take
that was a lot, sorry.
Oh, sorry that you were done.
So no, I said that was a lot. Sorry. That was a lot. Go ahead.
Okay, perfect. So to get you to that point, to really get to that extended outline, here are some brainstorming questions. And so typically, similar process when I'm working with a student, I do send them brainstorming questions just because it is a good way to get them thinking. The personal statement seems like such a big, scary thing whenever you are just thinking about it kind of abstractly. But when you break it down into like, okay, first, like Michaela said, we're going to do brainstorming questions, it's not nearly as scary if you start, answering all of them. So I do have them answer every single one of them, and then we kind of talk it through. And I believe if you check out the handouts, these questions are there too, so you can check them out and start answering them on your own as well, and start that brainstorming process. And it's important to realize that it doesn't have to be some major, huge event. Like a lot of students are kind of excuse me, not coughing and dying, but a lot of students are like, I haven't had some huge monumental moment, and it doesn't have to be some huge monumental moment. And we'll go over like a sample essay that we really loved later, and you'll see, the moment she's talking about is like a Fulbright teaching assistant position she did, but the little moments in it are just like small things that she did. It's not a life-changing huge thing. She wasn't saving someone who got like shot or flying across the world to save people. No, she was just doing kind of everyday ordinary things, and that's completely okay because you're probably an ordinary person, and that's okay. The important thing is that it just has to be personal, and it's best, of course, if it shows your motivation to join the medical field. So here are some questions, and I'll give you guys kind of a second to look at them as I drink some water. And something really important to think about is that, these essays, this personal statement is not the time to be modest. However, that being said, it's not the time to be boastful or arrogant. There's a fine line, of course, and so that's why I do recommend that you at least show your personal statement to one other person before you submit it, just to make sure that the tone is correct. I think that unfortunately most students err on the side of not being boastful, and they're not showcasing their good qualities. Like they're definitely downplaying how amazing the things that they did. So if you don't tell us, we're never going to know what you did or what you've accomplished. So it is really important that you use this time to talk about like the single achievement that you're most proud of. Like it's okay to be proud of things that you've done. I often tell my students to kind of think about what your mom would say to her friends when she's like bragging about you, because I feel like parents are often more forgiving to their kids, and so that kind of think about the words she would use, like the things that she would say. So that, you can rewrite that story in your own words, talk about kind of those moments she's so proud of you. So I believe we have some more brainstorming questions for you. And again, those are in the handouts. And so I'll give you another second to kind of read these through, but essentially it's just having a look at your perspective, your challenges, a time you essentially like pushed yourself out of the comfort zone, or, were empathetic towards others, because it's a good quality for doctors to have, something that you want to be showing those admissions officers. And so as you're going through these brainstorming questions, same thing with your personal statement, we want it to be very specific, reasons why, this is your greatest challenge. Don't just say like, oh, it was really hard. Tell me more. We always want really specific things. So for example, you wouldn't just say like, I'm a smart student who wants to give back to my community. Great. Like that's going to be like every single student. That doesn't tell me anything about you. It's better to be way more specific, like talk about a volunteering experience that, maybe sparked your interest in helping refugees in your community. And then you could kind of tell us about the challenges of understanding how to connect with these refugees, the language barriers, understanding the things that they needed help with, how this kind of organization maybe that you've created has grown, how you had to convince people to help, but more importantly, what you learned along the way and how you've grown. So we always want to be kind of considering these things, these really personal stories throughout our essays. And we're going to go into a lot more examples too, but I'm going to pass it over to Michaela.
And I would say I had a student who really, really struggled with, he didn't want to come across too boastful, and I was really pushing him to talk more. Like he had accomplished great things, like incredible things. He created a brand new prosthetic limb out of materials that had never been used before, so it could be more affordable to underserved areas. So like he did a whole project all by himself and was published in an academic journal. So he was doing incredible things. And he was really struggling with, like, how do I talk about this and not brag about it? And so what we basically did is I told him to come at it from the perspective of, what did you learn from it? Because then you're sharing, what happened, but you're coming at it from a much more humble position of like, I really learned that I need to, push myself and I need to stay on deadlines and things like that. Otherwise, the journal never would have gotten done, the journal article. And, so he was coming at it from that perspective. So he's still mentioning things that he accomplished, but from a humble perspective, basically. So if you're really struggling with that, that's one angle to come at it from. But we want to talk about the structure a little bit. So to have an effective and memorable personal statement, trust me, from reading thousands of essays, you need to first understand and work within the right structure to honestly make it memorable after they read your essay. So while everyone is going to have a wildly different personal statement as far as content, there is honestly a formula that's proven to leave an impact. So we'll talk about that real quick. First, you start with a captivating opening line, something that makes admissions counselors immediately take notice that this essay is going to be different. And don't worry, I promise you I have examples in a second. They just didn't fit on this page, but they're coming. And we want to make sure that this is like something clever or deep or dramatic, just something that sets it apart, something that's different than, in 2012, I volunteered 200 hours at Mercy Hospital. Like, that's not something different. They're going to read 400 of those essays, and nothing about that sentence is telling them that this essay is going to be different from anything that will come, It sets them up to want to skim your essay, if that makes sense. So we need an opening line that tells them that this essay will be different. Then you need the body of the essay, which gives the reader, of course, the full story. Like we said, the hook line is the line. But we need to make sure that we're having great use of descriptive language throughout and effective storytelling techniques. And we are supporting that great opening line. We're making sure we have, we're demonstrating how eloquent and articulate we are on the page as a way to demonstrate how professional you are. So think of the body of the text as like the content for your mini autobiography, and just make sure you aren't afraid to get introspective and share what you've learned and about who you are. And then finally, you need the sinker. So you need an ending that ties back into your intro. This is the big trick that's really hard to accomplish. But when you do this, it makes the reader leave the essay with a sense of, oh, everything was tied up neatly, or like a sense of that was completed. They're just honestly left with a feeling that your story was finished. And it might sound strange to follow a formula like that, and you can absolutely have an effective essay without this formula. But honestly, the essays that I remember from my admissions days, which was, I guess, 3 years ago, but the essays that I remember at least 20 of them that I could just give you like a synopsis of what they were. They all follow this formula. So I remember them now years later. Some of them were in my first year, so that was 5 years ago. So all of them fall into this pattern. So not that you can't get in without this formula, but those are the ones I remember 5 years later. So that just means that, of course, other essays structured differently can gain admission. But again, if you want to be memorable, try to follow that formula. So let's talk about hooks, which is the opening sentence. So to begin your essay, of course, we want to grab the reader's attention. And I have, in my days of admissions, I read so many that just start they're just so passive, and ones that kind of start dramatically or just with like a bold statement. I guess you don't have to be dramatic, but just like bold, something that's just different. So let's talk through a couple of these options. But essentially, first of all, think of your essay like a mystery novel, and then brainstorm opening lines that would entice the reader to keep reading. And my trick here is that you can zoom in. I always say this: zoom in the lens on something small that almost sounds like unrelated to what you're going to talk about or something, and then zoom out the lens and give context. So here are some of those in play. One of them was, they say laughter is the best medicine. That was for a pre-med student who enjoyed writing stand-up comedy on the side, and her essay kind of wove the two together, but it was an interesting opening sentence. The next one, you never know where a simple idea might take you. That seems kind of small, but then when she went into it, she talked about how there was an incredibly inspiring business model for a local business that she really, really appreciated, and kind of how she wanted to emulate this random, it was like a cookie business, and how she actually wanted to shape her future medical practice around this business practice. And it was just an interesting concept for this cookie company. So it was like a simple idea, and you never know where it might take you. And she was talking about their business plan and how interesting it was. Then there was beating the odds quite literally in my blood. This was about a student who was talking about how her father beat an autoimmune disease, and she was working 2 jobs in college to help support her family while her dad was kind of battling this. And so she just was talking about her dad was beating the odds literally within him, and then she was beating the odds kind of emotionally and with her family. So that was kind of what that essay went into. And then my hands shook as I discovered my mistake. This was about a student writing about how she made a mistake in a lab, and it led to her discovering a new antibiotic, actually. So those are some examples of that in play. One thing that I would say when we're brainstorming how to start this and things to mention or things to cover, one trick that I say is to try to find the thing that you want to talk about, whether it's a personal trait or an item on your resume or just an inanimate object, like lipstick or something that somehow has a metaphor for you. Find the thing you want to talk about, and then find the unique way to look at it. So don't just come at things directly. Find a different way to look at it. So for example, I had a student who just really wanted to convey through his essay that he was resilient and adaptable. That was his goal. How do I just make sure that people know that I can walk into any situation I feel comfortable in a room? So we just talked about how he got that way, and it turns out he was telling me that he moved to a new city almost every single year for his dad's job. And his resume shows him to be kind of a jack of all trades and activities because he attended all these different schools and they kind of had a bunch of different activities. So he kind of did things all over the map. So we ended up actually starting his essay with saying, it's amazing how small your life can look when it's packed into boxes. So he doesn't just come out and say, I'm resilient and here's all the reasons why. He tells his story through like a unique perspective about talking about boxes. Like, my sports experience was packed into this box. And it's amazing that, you know, hundreds of dollars of uniforms and everything can be packed into a very small box and it can be put away because the next school doesn't have a sports team. And so like that's how he kind of did his essay, but it was really effective and just like an incredible essay by the end.
Great.
Now we'll have an example for you.
Those are good examples. So the next one we're going to dive into is kind of a specific essay, so you can see more or less like the structure of essay, kind of everything that we've been talking about, like the hook, the line and the sinker, kind of how we bring everything back full circle. So here is the first essay. And so this girl that I was kind of mentioning early about before wrote her personal statement. So I'll read it out loud a little bit to you guys and we can kind of skim through the rest and see how she brought it back full circle. But she starts off with, Jinja, really? I probe as I serve as a sounding board to my 3 6th graders. I began our after-school class by asking, what is your favorite movie? It took weeks of fist bumps, words of affirmation, and self-deprecating jokes at my Korean skills to finally hear my students' walls of self-consciousness crumble as they filled the room with their voice. Hearing the phrases, I looked Moana, and yes, really, I watched him, I decided we're going to work on the verbs watch, see, and look. After practice, I have them teach me similar Korean phrases. My students giggle while I stumble through pronunciation. One more, kind of the mini second paragraph. After a day of coordinating my PowerPoints with the textbook and filling out evaluations, I reflect on the path that has brought me to this rural school in South Korea as a Fulbright English teaching assistant. So I'm gonna go back. So as we can see here, she is being so descriptive. She's kind of throwing us into the middle of a story right here. We are really seeing what she's seeing. We're kind of like understanding her day-to-day life. Is this anything, you know, life-changing? No, she's literally talking about like Moana and teaching them some, you know, verbs, but she's making a difference, and she's talking here about how she's able to make a difference with these students' lives. All right, I'm gonna change my screen and talk. You can see it? Okay, can everyone see this okay? Hope so. Make it a little bit bigger maybe. Oh, I made it too big, aggressively so. Okay, here we go. But you know, now she pulls it back and she kind of now starts to reflect on that path. So she really uses her little words to form the path that she's going to take throughout her entire essay. So then she goes here and she takes it all the way back to high school. She talks about her AP bio class, like her first experience, you know, dissecting something and kind of the fear that she has. And we're really in this moment with her, like, look at these descriptive words that she's using to show us. She's talking kind of about her fear, but then how that fear kind of turns into her hunger, and about, like, you know, the things that it continues to lead on. She talks kind of about her big motivations for wanting to be a doctor. So, you know, that desire to learn, that research, kind of the fascination with learning more about things. And, you know, how it kind of leads into the post-concussion symptoms. And so we kind of see here about the research and how she gets involved here. And we start to see more about how she's incorporating her studies with her, you know, her real life experiences. So she's always trying to connect. You know, I studied this in school. It's starting to come alive here when I'm shadowing Dr. Guevara, like the PI, about, you know, the youth football. So that she had done research, and now she's also shadowing, you know, a physician as well, to kind of help to see more about practicing what she's learned. So we see more about that. Is she talking about anything life-changing? No, but she's making it personal because she's showing what she learned. She's showing what she was inspired about, and, like, you know, what is so interesting to her. So this essay couldn't have been written by anyone else because she's including these little details. Are her experiences going to be similar to other students? Maybe, but we're really seeing here, you know, what it is about her that is so unique, what's kind of driving her passion to want to study medicine. And especially lines like this, you know, she learned that the compassionate medicine requires combining science with an understanding of social pressures and the patient's priorities. So she's showing us what she's learned through her experiences, through her shadowing, through her research, through her studies in general. And so that's kind of what we're starting to see. She's building on her experiences. And so the story kind of continues. She's talking about, more things about she's learning, more research, working in a hospital, working with clinicians, those kind of things. We're really seeing how she's starting to get to that path, which got her to South Korea. And so ultimately, that's what we want to see. We want to see, I'm going to go back to my presentation because she brings it back, kind of full circle. She stepped off the flight, not knowing anyone in South Korea, nor understanding the language. And so we had seen before, that she had learned how to connect with people through her work in the clinic and stuff like that, with working with patients. So her experiences had kind of led her to this moment. However, these challenges morphed into opportunities to learn. I've grown to be sensitive to my tone after seeing my students shut down because they thought I was angry when I was just surprised. After experiencing invalidation as a doctor quickly sent me home with antibiotics and a foreign explanation, I've committed to making others feel heard. This year has ignited feelings of gratitude for my position as an English speaker in America, and I'm motivated to serve populations who do not hold that privilege. And so here she's doing something super basic. She's talking about the little things that she learned and how she wants to be a better physician because of it. These aren't, once again, crazy big things that she's doing. She's just picking out little moments in her life and showcasing, opening up a little corner of her world to us. And that's ultimately what you need to be doing with this essay. And then she really brings it back full circle again with that mink dissection that we talked about in the very beginning. So just like Michaela was talking about, the hook, line, sinker, full circle back to the beginning. What started as a mink dissection that sparked a curiosity for the sciences has transformed into a confident decision to pursue a career as a physician. I'm eager to serve as the nexus between medical science and communities. As a physician, I will love my patients, actively listen and respect differences to work towards healing, while also conducting research to drive advancements in patient care. This essay leaves us with no doubts about what her career is, what type of person she is. And so that's exactly what you want to be doing with your own essays. If you don't have similar experiences, that's okay, because you definitely do have an experience where you had to reach out to someone who wasn't the same as you, where you had to learn how to communicate with people that maybe couldn't speak English or had a different way of speaking than you did. You had to learn how to problem solve, or you just had to learn how to be a more effective physician, how to communicate in any sense of the word. And so those are kind of things that you want to be talking about here. What kind of qualities do you think that you convey that, you think a medical school might be looking for? Maybe write those down and think about those experiences that you had that have helped you showcase those experiences. But really, what we love most about it is just her ability to showcase us from start to finish, what it is about her. So we get to see her top extracurriculars, we get to see little moments of her life, and that's ultimately, what would make a really great personal statement. She wasn't trying to tell us every single thing she's done. I'm sure her resume was filled with other activities. Without a doubt, she did more than just that. But she recognized that, you only have 5,000 or 5,300 characters. We have to kind of limit what we talk about. And so that's okay. So just try and make sure that you're not trying to cram everything in there. She talked about, everything kind of made sense and flowed well. And I'm sure she had to cut out quite a few activities that she wanted to talk about. But remember, you do have the secondaries to kind of expand on some things. You have, your meaningful experiences. You have, 600, 500 characters to talk about your activities in the application platform. So it's okay. You don't have to cram everything in. Just try and pinpoint what's the most important things that you want the medical school to know about you.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I have.
Absolutely.
That one.
And I know that, it's reading that personal statement. I know sometimes this is the biggest thing that I have, when I watch other webinars and things like that on writing essays, and they have these incredible experiences, and the average student that hasn't had those is struggling to okay, well, how do I emulate what they did there when I haven't had these great experiences? So instead of having that Fulbright experience that she had, you can write a very effective similar essay for tutoring students through VIP Kids. And, you know, doing a tutoring for, I mean, I think that's, isn't that with students in China? Is that right? And then you can just do it virtually. It's like a little side gig that people do all the time. Yeah, but you can do the same thing, like connecting with students, you know, in the early morning of, you know, every weekend and things like that. You know, really reaffirms my desire to want to communicate with people, you know, no matter their language. Or, I mean, what about if you tutored students in STEM in like a predominantly Spanish speaking community, and then tutoring someone in math and finding a common language helps you want to communicate with others no matter their language. You can do the exact same effective things that student did in her essay with more local experiences. You don't have to do the Fulbright experience to be able to write something like that. Mm-hmm. You can absolutely bring it more localized. So really, essentially, we just want to make sure, you know, that you understand where we're going with the whole how to completely convey who you are in your essay. Your essay is truly the only part of your application that allows you to show your personality. It's really hard to do that in a resume. You know, like volunteered 400 hours at the food bank. It's really hard to get across your personality. You can't throw in humor there or be clever with that sentence. It's very hard to do that. So look at your essay, especially maybe when you're done with your extended outline, and just see, like, does it say everything that I want it to say? This is if they only looked at this essay and they didn't have my secondaries, they didn't have my resume, do they get enough of a sense of who I am? Does it say everything that it should say about me in this essay? Because so many students look at it as like, I'm just going to write this essay and I just need to like cover a couple things and I'm done. But if you're looking at it from the perspective of like, this is the only thing the college has to know you, does it say everything it needs to say for them to accept you? It's a little easier to kind of edit yourself at the end and add in some content, add in some deep moments as you kind of shape it basically at the end. So that's essentially just kind of what we wanted to impart today, is just ways to get deep, ways to get introspective, ways to structure, and some examples along the way. Do you want to switch the slide, Lindsay? I'm all out of order. Perfect. Thank you. So, and if you find yourself, of course, wanting more personalized advice, if you want our help with checking over, you know, your ideas for an essay and everything, we are absolutely here to help you craft a memorable personal statement. And also beyond essay help, we're experienced in helping you prepare for interviews, even offering mock interview practice for traditional interview formats or MMI interviews. And we also work on an hourly rate, and every bit of time that's left unused in your package gets fully refunded to you. So you're just working with us on the exact amount of hours and the exact topics and areas that you need help in. You're not just signing up and being set through, you know, a set number of classes and then you're just done. It's whatever you need help on, just individualized advice and just helping you every step of the way, basically.
Yeah. And one of our big ask too is, you know, our goal for these webinars is, of course, is to make sure that you learned, that you felt more confident. And we, of course, just want your feedback about how we did. So I'll send out the chat link actually right now. Oh, perfect. Yay. So a review out, or a Facebook review page out. If you could take a few minutes just to, you know, leave us a review if you had a positive experience on our Facebook, you know, telling us what you liked about it, how we were able to help you. However, if you did not, you know, we didn't cover something you like, if you have like constructive feedback, like, you know, you guys, I wish you guys gave more examples, or, you know, that you went slower on this particular aspect, you know, go ahead and email us, and I'll send my email and Michaela's email as well. And just to like thank you everyone for, giving us feedback, whether it's on Facebook or emailed feedback. We will be sharing our med school essay blueprint book. It's got 55 plus pages, and it's got a ton of advice, even more than what we went over today in this class or this webinar. Shows you about more tips for brainstorming a topic, how to strengthen your word choice, more examples of real essays that worked, and more importantly, why they worked. And so remember also, you can go to the handouts. We have 4 different ones, opening paragraph brainstorming, brainstorming questions, how to show not tell, different ways for you to help elevate your writing and help it stand out. And so just make sure that we, if you do, want to email us with your feedback, we'll definitely send you that essay blueprint. And we would also appreciate if you leave us a great review on Facebook too, just so that, we can know what we did right and if we're doing everything okay. And if not, how we can even make it better. And also we will have a little bit of a Q&A. Michaela has one more little thing to say, but we will have a Q&A. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to start sending them in and we can, get to answering them afterwards.
Great. And just as a reminder to everybody on the webinar that we are, sorry, Michaela, I was just going to say, start putting your questions in the chat because we are going to get to the Q&A section in just a few more slides. So please start filling up that Q&A section with all of your questions for Michaela and Lindsay, and I'll pass it back over to you to plug your upcoming.
Perfect. So I'm putting in the chat right here our Eventbrite link. And we have some webinars of our own coming up if you'd like to join and get some more advice, send us more questions, or especially if you send in questions right now and you think of something later and you want to answer, join one of these other webinars we have too and ask a question then if you think of something after today. So in February, we have Beat the Odds, insider tips for applying to medical school. So that's pretty relevant to what we're doing today. Pretty sure everybody on this webinar would benefit from that. And then in April, we have an Ask Me Anything session. So we'll just be answering all the questions you have about medical school, anything you need. And then in May, what medical school hopefuls need to do this summer, just summer activities for resume building. And of course, if you want to join, you can click the link I put in the chat just now. It says eventbrite.com. And of course, you're always welcome to email Lindsay. Lindsay's email is at the bottom. You can find my email too if you go to the Moon Prep website and just look at the counselor page. So you can find us multiple ways.
Yeah, I sent those in the chat too.
Okay. Oh, perfect. Yay.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thanks, Lindsay and Michaela. And again, just as a reminder to the audience, please start putting your questions in the chat. We will get to them in just a few more slides, but I'd like to introduce Associate Director for Student University Partnerships, Milena Garcia, to tell you a little bit about Ross Med and AUC as well, who are bringing you the webinar this evening. Milena, over to you.
Thanks, Katie. Hi, everyone. Good to have you here. I'm your bonus speaker, so I will be brief and just wanted to introduce myself once again. My name is Milena Garcia, and I am part of Ross University and AUC Student and University Partnerships. We're happy to sponsor this webinar here for you. So now you can become a pro at writing your personal statement for medical schools. Wanted to briefly spend a couple minutes here just highlighting the 2 sister schools that are sponsoring this webinar. So first of all, Ross University. Well, actually, I'll start with the what makes the 2 sister schools so similar. Both Ross University and AUC, American University of the Caribbean, are U.S. modeled schools. Each of the schools are over 40 years old. We're well established with our curriculum. U.S. modeled schools, meaning we follow the equivalent curriculum to the U.S. schools. The difference being that we do our medical sciences in the Caribbean and then the clinical training back in the U.S., or we also offer some international clinical rotations as well. This slide here highlights Ross University in specific. You can see we have over 15,000 alumni already practicing all over US and Canada, so all over North America. Some really interesting numbers I think you should know is, of course, our USMLE pass rates this past year was 96.7% first-time takers. They're really nice. We're very proud of our students. And also for Ross, the residency attainment rate last year was 95.2%, as you can see here. So super exciting. If you don't mind forwarding to the next slide, and now let's highlight AUC and a little bit of what makes AUC special, also following an equivalent curriculum to the US schools, with the the medical sciences being done in the Caribbean and the clinical rotations being back in the US, with the opportunity of also doing some international rotations. AUC is known for smaller classes, so they have at this time 7,500 graduates already practicing all over US and Canada. So really nice between the two schools, highlighting the unity of it, the goal. We share a mutual goal of graduating highly competitive physicians to get into residency in both US and Canada. And you can see here also highlighting AUC's attainment, residency attainment at a 92% this past year. Next slide, please. Just wanted to give you guys my contact information, and also everybody on this call, if you have specific questions about the two schools, I wanted to forward you directly to each of the schools. So you can see here admissions for Ross and admissions for AUC's emails directly. So you can definitely contact individualized admissions coordinators for each of the schools. Just highlighting once again, Ross University follows an organ system based program. We have a digital anatomy lab in 3 term starts a year, January, May, and September. And AUC following the traditional curriculum with a nice dissection lab, and also known for its smaller classes. So truly, it is an entirely personal preference. There are not self-exclusive, so yes, you can apply to both, and here's how. So don't hesitate, contact both the individual admissions coordinators, and let us help you successfully get into one of our medical programs. Thank you, Katie, for allowing me to do my little pitch. Thank you, Lindsay and Michaela. We appreciate all your knowledge. And Katie, back to you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Milena. And Milena will be around. If there's other questions, please put them in the chat as it relates to admissions. But we do have a couple of questions, Lindsay and Michaela, for you. So first and foremost, the examples of the hooks that were used, can they be used as opening sentences for the body of the personal statement?
Absolutely. So some of those, I have a student that kind of course, we want a good opening statement to let them know that this will be different. So those sentences could absolutely be kind of at the end of the opening paragraph or the beginning of the body paragraph. That is perfectly fine. I have a student right now who he has one of the best essays I've ever read in my life, and his hook comes at the very end of his opening paragraph. So he almost kind of spends the whole opening building up to it, and then he has this transition sentence that's just like, whoa. And then he goes into the body and like explains where he's coming from. So those hooks can absolutely come at the end of the intro paragraph or at the beginning of your body. I think he even has a great opening line to his first body paragraph too that like answers the question he set up. So that's a great effective way to do it too. But just know that like his opening line isn't boring either. Like it's just not as good as what's coming. So then you're even more blown away. So still just don't say like don't open up with I spent 10 years in piano lessons. Don't start with that still and then have your opening. still make sure that you have like an opening line that's just less of a hook. It's a sub hook, and then you hit the hook or something. So absolutely, that does not have to be used only in the opening sentence. You can use it effectively elsewhere too, for sure.
Yeah, I would only caution, like in journalism, it's called like burying the lead. You don't want to like have a lot of fluff. So kind of what Michaela was saying, you know, you still want really good content beforehand. Just make sure that, you know, as like admission season goes on, as Michaela, I'm sure can tell you, she's read a gazillion essays in one day. She gets tired. Sometimes you just naturally start to skim. So you want to really hook them from the beginning, and then, you know, rehook them halfway through is fine too, but you don't want to not have anything good in the beginning and then have your hook, because they might not even be paying attention at that point, because they might have already started to skim because you didn't get their attention. So that's the one thing I would kind of caution for.
And honestly, my biggest piece of advice that I tell my students every single day when we're logging in to edit their essays or something like that, look at your essay from the perspective of, okay, if I had read 40 essays before this one and I started reading it, what is my impression of this essay? And then before you're ready to submit it, I always have my students literally go find 5 or 10 more essays they didn't read in the sample section, or go back and reread 5, 10 essays they found when they were brainstorming. Read 10 of them and then read their essay again. And what feedback do you have objectively about your essay, you know, in light of reading other people's? So constantly think about the perspective of who will be reading it and work from there. Because if you're just writing an essay, I'm just going to write this essay about myself, that's fine, but it could be more effective if you kind of thought about it strategically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when I read a student's like first draft of an essay, I always almost like skim, not really skim, but quickly read through it. I don't give any feedback on the first time. And if I can get to the end and I don't really understand what you said, that's a bad sign that you either were too, you know, weren't descriptive enough, you were just using too many fluff words or something like that. So you always kind of have to think, this person might be reading quickly. They're not going to be close reading it. This isn't an English, like, you know, composition class. We're going to be skimming through. And of course, you know, you want to make sure that your essay is coming through quickly and they want to be stopping and reading more ultimately.
Mm-hmm. Agree.
Awesome. Great answers, ladies. So next question is actually around COVID. And have you seen a difference in the admissions process during COVID? And has that changed the focus of any part of the essay writing? So that's kind of an interest of pulling in how COVID has been affecting medical school applicants, and if you've seen it come across in their writing in personal statements.
Yeah, definitely. So I think this cycle was just kind of crazy because life was kind of continuing on normal, and then it hit, you know, right before. So I don't think it really affected our people applying this year as much, depending on like kind of where they were in the cycle. If they already had their MCAT, it wasn't as big of a deal. But one thing that we definitely did see is that the MCAT was accepted later on, you know, much later than normal. Usually the schools won't even look at your application until you have the MCAT score, and that wasn't the case this year. You could apply, and as long as you had it in by a certain date, you know, I think at one point it was October or later, I'm not quite sure. You know, they would still look at you, still consider you, still even interview you. So that's definitely not the norm for most years. And kind of what I mentioned before from like our interviews we did from the admissions officer is like a pandemic, unfortunately, is no excuse to be sitting at home and like, you know, making TikTok videos all day. Like that's not a good reason. Well, not only be making TikTok videos at home, I guess, just also, you know, be making a difference in your community. So there are tons of ways you could still be doing it. So the activities that our students are doing are just different than what we've seen before. So maybe instead of volunteering in person, they're volunteering online. So there's like a ton of different sites. There's sites where you can like, be the eyes for like a blind person. They'll call you and be like, hi, I'm in this location. Can you help me do whatever I need to do? There's like the crisis text line where you're getting trained, you're going through like 30 hours of training, and then like people will text when they're in a crisis. And a lot of people are in kind of mental health crises in a pandemic. So this one was like a really popular one with our students. There's a ton of different options like that. You could do doing online tutoring. That hasn't gone away. So there are a lot of ways you could still be making a difference. So before we would see students maybe doing research in person, whereas now they're doing research virtually. There's ultimately no excuse to not have anything on your resume. And so I think that that's kind of the biggest change, is just the type of activities. Maybe they couldn't do shadowing in person. Maybe they did it virtually instead. Maybe they couldn't do their research in the lab, so they're doing like a more like clinical research project instead. So there really are no excuses to have a light resume, because there are going to be other students who were working, who were thinking throughout this process. And you didn't have to be in a hospital, on a COVID floor, volunteering or anything like that. That's not required at all. Like, they're not asking for you to do that, but they are asking that you look at what your resume is like, how you could be making a difference, how you can be changing someone's life. Something small is fine. You're still in college. You're not expected to be changing the world, but, doing something. And so like, for that reason also, we would never have a student like the example essay that we talked about before, going to South Korea as like the Fulbright scholar. Our students probably aren't going to be like that this year, because those programs were all shut down. And so maybe the essays are a little bit different this year, but that doesn't mean that they're bad. They're just different.
And I had a student who wrote a secondary about how he had a clinical internship, and then obviously when COVID hit, he was transitioned to like continue doing his internship tasks, but they just changed and went more towards telehealth, and just kind of like how that changed for him. And then also it went into how he actually saw so many more patients, like, because I mean he had the internship kind of before, and then he kind of transitioned, so he'd already been there for a year, and he said that he saw so many more people utilizing telehealth as preventative care. And so he said there was just like astronomical more difference they were making in preventative care. And so he wrote his essay on ways that he would really like to incorporate telehealth to reach rural areas, to continue utilizing this in a more like integrated platform when he opens his own practice in the future. So he just said, I think this is super effective in certain ways. I mean, obviously it was awful, but it really had kind of a good outcome in my area, and I'd like to incorporate that in my own practice. So, I mean, that's just one example of how COVID has definitely changed things, but it's not making you like lack for things to write about.
Fantastic. Great answers. I think most of our other questions are cleared up in the chat. We've been feverishly typing away. So at this point, I would say that we are probably wrapped up for the evening, and just wanted to give a huge shout out to both Lindsay and Michaela for the amazing work from this presentation this evening. I think that you guys have received so many thank yous in the questions section. So hopefully you'll be seeing some of the attendees in some of your future webinars that MoonPrep offers. Do remember that everybody will receive a recording of tonight's webinar post-event, so that way you can listen to it over and over again to pick up all the beautiful tips and tricks that Lindsay and Michaela laid out for you so beautifully this evening. Let me just make sure there's one. It looks like the question section is firing up one more time, but it looks like it's just a bunch of thank yous. So again, just wanted to say thank you so much, everybody in the chat, saying it was extremely helpful. And now they have ideas what to write about, which is awesome. And again, we'll send this out to everybody post-event. But on behalf of Ross University School of Medicine and the American University of the Caribbean School of Medicine and MoonPrep, we'd like to thank everybody for joining this evening, and be on the lookout for this recording. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful night.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.